I remember the call like it was yesterday. A gentleman named Travis calls me and he says, Paul, I'd like to build a Helderburg for my wife. She's been on your website for months and she loves what you're doing, and I want it to be a surprise. That caused panic for me right there. Been there, done that before, where a husband or a wife creates something or purchases something for the spouse and they want it to be a surprise. That works great in a handbag, but when we're building a Helderburg, whole different scenario. So as we talked, and he told me that we're getting ready to purchase a home in the Hamptons, and he shared some photos of the home in the Hamptons, and he told me about his wife and what she liked. I said, you know, I think the best surprise for her will be to just tell her that you've commissioned a Helderburg and let me work with her one-on-one. And that's exactly what we did, and the result is Arvon. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, that Arvon was going to be a surprise for Travis's wife. And this is the type of surprise that you simply don't want to do. A handbag, sure, we can do that. That could be a surprise, because if it's not the ideal color or the ideal design or brand, you can return that easily. Something that takes over a year to build in 3,000 hours, not so easy. So as I talked to Travis, and sure enough, thank goodness that he introduced me to his wife, and we spent a lot of time together talking about colors and design and persona and exactly how she was going to use it, and this is what it evolved into. But if we would have gone with the design that Travis wanted originally, yes, it would have been lifted, it would have had the Helderburg stance, but it would have been a hard top, and it would have been completely a different color, different interior, completely different persona, so it would have looked much, much different than what his wife wanted. And I thoroughly enjoyed that interaction, because the interaction was a wonderful experience, because we talked about old classic Porsches, we talked about color, we talked about vibrancy, we talked about what the water looks like when the wind's blowing across it and it's getting the little waves and the ripples, the blue water of the Hamptons. We talked about the sky, the clouds. We talked about what it feels like to drive a Helderburg with a top off and just feeling the wind come through the windows and come across the top when you have the top off. We talked about all of those things. So there was a lot of inspiration and a lot of excitement as we went back and forth. We talked about vacations that they'd had and what was some of the most enjoyable vacations, and that's how we come up with Arvon. The first thing you'll notice is the color, and if you've watched any of my videos, you know I love color, and doing it one of a kind, one off. And I'm not saying that I only do a color once, but I try really hard to do a color only once. And this color is stunning. And I've said it many a times that pictures and videos simply don't do it justice, that you need to see a Helderburg in person to really understand the color and the depth of the color. And this one being a custom mix, even more so. But here's the problem. It will be leaving soon, and it will be going to the Hamptons to be at their new home. So you're not going to be able to see it, but I'm definitely going to try to borrow it and take it to some events that we do. Or if you're in the Hamptons, you'll see it in the Hamptons, because this blue is absolutely stunning. It is a metallic blue, and I borrowed the color from early Porsche 356. That it's very similar color, but we put a little finer metallic in it, and by doing that finer metallic, it gives it a pearlescence, and under the sun, it's beautiful. When it's really cloudy, when the clouds are full and fluffy and white, it takes on that color from the clouds. And then as the sun starts to set, it takes on that warm into the pearlescence of the paint. And if you follow me on Instagram and Facebook, you will have seen pictures of this one, Arvon, because I've thoroughly enjoyed driving it. I have not taken the top off yet, but I'm going to. So color, absolutely stunning. Can't talk about that enough. But let's move around to the front. On the design, I mean, there was things that the gentleman wanted. He wanted a winch. He wanted that rugged adventure feel. And of course, he's got a winch. But this is not just any winch. This is a custom winch, and it's billet. And of course, I could have done different colors. That we could have done the red. We could have done any color we want to, basically. But the red just worked beautifully. And the reason that the red works beautifully is because it gives you that pop of color. And a lot of times I do use red, like with red tow hooks and then red calipers, but we'll get into that. But it just worked. And the fit and finish of this winch that is handmade in England is absolutely stunning. I mean, this is not your everyday winch that you order off of Amazon, or let's just say it's a beautiful winch. Let's just leave it at that. The bumper is custom, so we have a custom Helderburg bumper, and I pulled the color in. It would have been really easy just to do a powder-coated black bumper, call it done, and move on. But what it really needed on the front end, having that it's a soft top, there's just something about this soft top. When you do a soft top, specifically on a 5-door 110, it kind of affects the lines. And for example, I'm also a Porsche enthusiast, and I've never had a convertible Porsche because I just don't like the lines that it creates. And a lot of times on a soft top, I just don't like the way the lines are changed from a hard top. And on a 5-door 110, it always looks a little too lean. It looks a little soft. It doesn't have that stance. But by adding this bumper with this winch and bringing everything out, and just the lines and then the holes in the bumper and just the vertical elements, which this is a high approach angle bumper, it puts some more weight in it, and it brought everything together. Of course, this is my opinion. I'd love to hear what you think, but what do you think about how it brought it together? And then on the front, you always see this on a Helderburg, that we do the bump out right here. It also serves a purpose. It serves a purpose for a much larger intercooler to get colder air to the turbo, but it also is a design cue because I'm creating that, that depth and bringing it out, versus normally what you would see on a classic Defender is a grille that's just flush with the headlights. But I like to bring it out, and it just fits. It just makes it work, especially with the Puma bonnet, because normally on a classic Land Rover, you don't have the hump in the bonnet, and the hump gives it that masculine feel. And then of course we take it one step farther, knowing that the louvers here, these are hand cut. We hand cut these in, and they don't serve any purpose. They're really just a design cue. And this is a design cue back to the classic old school Bentleys and the Aston Martins and the Bugattis, because they would always do the louvers for additional cooling. On the Defender with the turbo diesel, we don't need additional cooling because the turbo diesel is automatically a cool running engine. So you don't need it, but it does really bring in a design cue. Let's talk about the engines. This is a performance-tuned turbo diesel. And you know what my stance is when it comes to a V8 gasoline, at least if you've watched any of my videos. The vehicle was not engineered for that. And the V8 gasoline creates a tremendous amount of heat that you can feel in the cabin. And there's really no reason to change it over to a General Motors V8 engine. A lot of times people say, oh, it's going to be more power. Well, a performance-tuned turbo diesel is going to give you all of the power you need. You're going to be able to drive on the highway. You're going to be able to drive around the city. You're going to be able to do everything that you would want to do. And in fact, you're going to be able to do it even better because the turbo diesel has a tremendous amount of torque. So this one is going to be in the Hamptons. It's going to be on the sand. And being that it has all of this torque, it's not going to get you stuck because horsepower spins the tires, you don't get the traction, and that's what happens with a V8 gasoline engine. And if you love to snow ski, if you're going to be in the snow, the same thing. A turbo diesel engine will outperform a gasoline V8 that's all about horsepower. And it's just, it's a fun, it's the nostalgia. And the final reason, it's numbers matching. This vehicle, the drivetrain in it was the original drivetrain, but we completely rebuilt it all the way from the crankshaft up, the pistons, everything. So it has a tremendous amount of power. It's not noisy. And I think a beautiful part is we're talking 28 to 32 miles per gallon in this versus a V8 gasoline, you're around 8 to 10 miles per gallon. And it's not that we can't afford fuel, but it's wasteful. And it also gets a little tiring having to stop at the gas station that often. All right, so there's that. Billet headlight surrounds here. And then our statement Helderburg headlights here, which we have some new Helderburg headlights coming out really soon. So we have our new bumpers, which we have this model, and then we have another one, which is our bumper that goes up on either side. And then moving down, all the billet work in here, billet work here, billet work here. And the color is beautiful, and it just works. But when we get into the interior, I think you're going to say, wow, that is a luxury interior. That's beautiful. And, you know, the weather's pretty nice. I need to take the top off and go for a drive. And that's probably the most, well, I won't say the most, but one of my perks of where I get to build a Helderburg, and then I get to drive it. And my neighbors probably wonder, what exactly is it this guy does? He must have 50 cars. So anyway, let's look at the interior. I'm in my happy place right now, if you can't tell. So here's my question for you. Could you see yourself driving Arvon? Could you see yourself driving around town, enjoying life? And then ultimately the question is, would you have the top on or would the top be off the majority of the time? And for me, the top would be off the majority of time. I would do just a billet, not a billet, I got billet on the mind, billet aluminum, but I would just do a bimini top, which would just cover the driver and the passenger. It would leave all the other rest of the area open, which brings me to the point, a question that I do get a lot of times when it comes to a soft topper. Should we do vinyl interior? And I'm like, oh, vinyl is plastic. We don't need to do plastic anything. This leather interior has a really high wax content. So you could pour a glass of water on it and walk away and leave it for an extended period of time for hours. First, the water's just going to roll off. It's going to be fine. And it would take a very long time for water to get absorbed into this leather. And that's by design. Because when you're designing something, not only does it need to be beautiful, but it also needs to serve the purpose. And being that this is a soft top, I chose a different grade leather just so if they have the top off. And not only will it repel the water, but it's also really good for UV. So it won't fade. I'm not saying you don't need to maintain the leather, because you do need to maintain the leather once a year. You want to use some Connolly leather hide treatment, which that's the stuff right there. And just nourish it a little bit. So sitting in this interior, it is stunning. It's a medium soft brown with a winter, basically a winter white combo. And it just creates a beautiful contrast. And I mean, thinking about it too, is the winter white looks much like sand, and it just helps bring everything together. And then the darker, the brown, the medium brown, with these two colors, the top comes into play, because then the top is in between that color wheel of those two colors. So you have the darker brown, the beige, and then the winter white. So it really just comes together beautifully. Did the two-tone, did it pretty subtle, did the top of the dash in the darker brown, did the lower dash in the winter white, and then the door cards, we've changed the pattern up. We've been doing the one pattern with the diamond stitch across the entire top for some time now, so we changed it up. We like to change, just like we're changing headlights and everything too coming up. This does have the high fidelity audio system where it has the Focal speakers. And by the way, Focal custom makes some speakers for us specifically for under the dash for the size. They're not mass produced. Well, no Focal speakers are mass produced. So we have Focal through, and then we have the Marconi amps, which are made in Italy. And then, of course, the Alpine head unit, which we're getting ready to change that coming up soon, too. Not that anything's wrong with it, but I just like to try new things. We do have the Focal tweeters in the dash. These are the Utopias. These are made out of beryllium. So the audio system sounds beautiful, sounds fantastic. And put a little more into the audio system because it is a soft top. It is going to be on the beach. And I wanted the clients to be able to have an audio system that they could crank up loud, they could hear it, and it would still hold on to that clarity, that crispness, and that trueness. So this is the interior of where the driver and the passenger is going to spend time. But now let's go to the back, because there's no doubt in my mind that this is going to be a well-used Helderburg, that they're going to get a lot of enjoyment out of it with a lot of friends and a lot of trips around the Hamptons. But let's talk about the seating in the back now. So now we're at the back of Arvon, and you'll notice there is no spare tire on here yet because unfortunately there is a shortage in the tires that we use, and it's causing concern for us. I'm just going to note that apparently there's a shortage from all of the manufacturers, that they're simply not doing that size as much anymore. All right, so going to the back, you'll notice the tire carrier, and how you do it on a soft top is different the way it's done on the hard top. Hard top, it's one unit. You don't have to unlatch anything. Soft top, you unlatch it here, and then you open this piece up, and it has a steel cable that holds it here in place so it doesn't go that far. And then moving back, notice all the billet work here where the backup camera is built into the license plate light here. And then you have your handle here that is old school, that you crank it up. Let me make sure I unzip that a little bit. So crank up the handle, and then the door opens as such. And then notice the beautiful leather color in here with the diamond stitch. I really love the color in here, but of course I love the color in every Helderburg, because if I didn't love the color, well, you get my point. But anyway, all right, so moving to the top. And when you're using a soft top, of course, you got to roll up the rear window, roll up the side windows, and drive around that way. Or you can take the top and you can roll it up halfway, and it has lashing straps on the very top halfway. So then you could just have the top rolled up and expose the entire back end of the vehicle that way. So moving in, there's seating for 4 center face benches, which are my favorite. There is 4 seat belts. They're just not, they're behind the seat cushions right now. But this is where your guests are going to want to be for the nostalgia. So even though you get a 5-door 110 with the second row, and you have that second row, and I'm speaking from experience, that they're going to say, oh, we want to ride in the back because that's cool. So just know that you're going to have the conversation with your friends, your guests. They're going to be in the very back. You're going to be in the front driving. You're going to talk to them through the rear view mirror. Hence why a lot of times when you see a Helderburg, that I don't do 3 seats across the second row. I do 2 seats and a center console, not only for the additional storage with the center console, but it makes it easier for you to look back and you don't have that seat blocking. And then the center console in the second row makes for the perfect opportunity for us to custom build a box and put a really nice Focal subwoofer in the box, and you don't see any of the audio work that's done in here. And the audio work is a beautiful thing, that if you see how audio is done in a Helderburg, it's different than any other Defender you would see, classic Defender that is, because all of the connectors are soldered. There's no butt connectors or no turning wires or electrical tape. Everything is soldered in place. And then you have speakers that are here in the rear, the Focal, and then the subwoofer mid-range, and then you have multiple speakers in the front. So it is a full sound audio system. So the one last final touch when it comes to Arvon, the thing I want to share with you is the style of the bumper. It does take a 2-inch receiver so you can tow stuff, because they said specifically, they said, hey, would we be able to tow our jet skis and a little camper? And I said, yes, absolutely. So the bumper does take a 2-inch receiver, and it is wired for lighting. So it is all set up to spend time in the Hamptons, and set up to actually drive to the Catskills and do some camping and just enjoy the vehicle. So again, this is Arvon, 5-door, 110 Helderburg.